After winning in Week 17 in their final game in San Diego against the Kansas City Chiefs, the Chargers finished the 2016 season with a 3-13 record as their defense just could not hold it together as they were outscored by 100 points on the season. They finished last in the division. And they missed out on the number 1 pick. They would have had it if they had lost the final game of the season, but they were playing for pride at that point. They don't need the number 1 pick, especially considering the top prospect in this draft class is a quarterback, and they are in prime position to get one of the 2 tackle prospects that they have been looking at the number 3 overall pick. I'm going to super speed this section up to go as quickly as possible, but you can see the stats that our team did have individually in front of you right now. A lot of guys had pretty solid years. Keenan Allen had over 1,400 receiving yards, which I believe we'll show later, was pretty high in the league. Our offensive line was okay, not great, and I definitely think that we're going to address that in the offseason because the pass protection this last season was not very good. And Madden's not the greatest at indicating how good an offensive line is because it only goes by sacks allowed, which is a broken stat anyway, because I recently played a game where it said my right tackle allowed 3 sacks, but it was mostly because I was rolling out and I got stopped behind the line with the quarterback. So I don't think that's necessarily the greatest indication of offensive line performance. You can see right here some places that Philip Rivers ranked on the league, as well as Keenan Allen, who finished 3rd in receiving yardage on the season. Rather than show the entire NFL standings, I'm just going to show who finished in the playoffs and the playoff results. Jacksonville beat Houston in the wild card round. Detroit beat Los Angeles. Kansas City beat Cincinnati. And New Orleans defeated Arizona in what was probably the biggest upset of the entire weekend. In the divisional round, the Chiefs upset the Patriots. Dallas beat New Orleans. Jacksonville completely killed Oakland, who had a bye. I didn't think they were a playoff-ready team anyway. And Seattle beat Detroit by a touchdown in Seattle. And in the conference championship round, Kansas City killed Jacksonville. They were only able to score 10 points. And Dallas eked out a close game against the Seattle Seahawks. So it would be Chiefs and Cowboys in the Super Bowl. It is the first time that these 2 teams have ever met for a Super Bowl. It has not happened one other time in NFL history. And Kansas City would come out on top in a very close game, 34-27, one of the only teams to lose all season to the San Diego Chargers, and now they are Super Bowl champions. So Andy Reid finally won his Super Bowl. Very, very strange events going on, but we are officially going to put a wrap on the 2016 NFL season now that a Super Bowl victor has been crowned, and we're going to work our way into the offseason. Let's go through the retirements around the league, as the Chargers really didn't lose anybody besides tight end Antonio Gates. I alluded to this earlier. Usually players over a certain age will retire regardless of skill set or regression or anything, and if it was really a perfect world, Antonio Gates wouldn't have retired just because he is still a very skillful player, but he did retire. A lot of other notable names on this list as well. Cameron Wake, I believe Tom Brady was on here, Drew Brees, a few others, but let's get moving. I lost the footage that actually showed what contract, like when we were giving these guys contracts, but we re-signed 4 people who are already on our team. Terrence Mitchell, who's going to be moving to free safety, Daryl Worley, backup defensive end Cam Thomas, who we had to sign at some point during the year, and David Andrews, who was our starting center for a couple weeks while Matt Slauson was injured. All kind of depth signings except for Terrence Mitchell, who's going to be continuing to start for us at that free safety spot alongside Brandon Flowers at the strong safety spot. And you may have also noticed a big name that is not on that list, Manti Te'o. We will be letting him walk in free agency, as I think he was a big part of the reason that our run defense struggled so much last season, as his ratings are not very good for a linebacker, and I think we can do much better at that position. So we're looking forward here. We're going to make a few trades to open up some cap space because I wanted to fill a couple holes in free agency before we went on to the draft. A couple things that I thought that we were going to need that we might not necessarily find or be able to address in the draft. So we are going to trade Orlando Franklin and a 6th-round pick, or a 7th-round pick, for a 6th-round pick from Green Bay. That is really just to free up cap space. Orlando Franklin was a backup, and he was making $7 or $8 million. His cap hit was only like $2 million, but I didn't want that to go up after the year. We traded Dwight Lowry and Brandon Mebane, a couple guys who are making a combined $3 or $4 million that we could use in free agency for better players or more useful players. We're going to trade them to the Arizona Cardinals for a 4th round pick, number 120. We're trading Joe Barksdale and a 6th round pick to the Giants for a 2nd round pick. They had a big need at tackle, and Joe Barksdale is really only good at pass blocking. His impact blocking is low, so he's going to give up a lot of sacks. And I planned on addressing that left tackle position through the draft anyway, and Joe Barksdale really would have been left as a backup left tackle, left guard at that point, because I also planned on getting a guard in free agency. So this was really a trade just to free up the cap space and also get rid of a player that was overpriced for what role he would have been filling on the team. And usually I'm against making interdivision trades, but this is the only team that would accept a trade similar to this. We're trading DJ Fluker, a 6th round pick, and a backup outside linebacker who we were going to cut anyway for a 2nd round pick. DJ Fluker has terrible blocking ratings, decent awareness, but he is not panned out, and he is going to cost the Chargers over $4 million if they retain him this year, so they can trade him and easily make up that cap money. Alright, so that does it for trades. We will be permanently moving Terrence Mitchell to free safety and Brandon Flowers to strong safety. They both have very good zone coverage ratings, over 80. I think actually Brandon Flowers is just below 80, but it's still much better than man coverage. They both have man coverage ratings in the high 60s and zone coverage ratings that were in the high, for Flowers in the high 70s and Mitchell in the low 80s. So I thought this was a very good move, at least for in terms of coverage. I like to have both of my safeties covering usually. So I don't, and they're weak tacklers, but still, I still think that they can fill the role of safety while we look for a better option. Brandon Flowers probably isn't going to be with the team after this year anyway, because he's going to carry too high of a cap hit, but he costs too much to release at this point, and he's better than any other option I would have had on the roster. Most of the other guys I traded were because they were going to be backups or not good in the future. But we also released Stevie Johnson and Darryl Stuckey. That cleared up about $4 million in cap room. So all in all, I think we cleared up somewhere from about $10 million to $12 million in extra cap room that we would not have had normally. So we set out to solidify several positions, the first of which we needed a backup quarterback. We went for a young option, a relatively cheap option, only cost about about $4 million, $5 million a year, somewhere in that range. Jimmy Garoppolo, still young enough to turn into a solid long-term backup. I'm not really thinking that he's going to be our starter at any point, but he hedged the bets in case we could not manage to get a quarterback in this draft. So that was a safe signing. It also is an improvement over Kellen Clemens from last season, was our backup quarterback. We needed a backup running back, somebody with a little more versatility and a more wide-range skill set than Melvin Gordon, who is going to be starting next year. So we went out and signed Frank Gore to a 1-year deal. He has very good pass blocking ratings as well as catching, so he could be versatile in a 3rd down role, as well as still being a very good power runner, so he can get a couple short yards if we ever need them. You never have too many pass rushers, and in the case of the Chargers, they did not have enough, so they went out and signed Jarvis Jones, who's going to be a rotational pass rusher for them. Has pretty good power moves as well as block shedding, so he can be a versatile edge defender, and he really just provides another depth option after Melvin Ingram and Jeremiah Attawachu on these sides, as we did not really have a solid backup option or a guy that we could just rotate in to rush the passer. The kicking situation was an atrocity last year, so we went out and paid a little bit more than I would have liked, but we had to give the kicking market was way overpriced in this free agency class, so we went and gave Greg Zuerlein a 2-year, $5 million deal. Not overpaying really for him. It was about market value. Still more than I would have liked to pay. We only gave him a 2-year deal. He has 95 kick power and 87 accuracy. He would easily have been the best kicker on our team last year at any point, as we started 2 rookies and eventually ended up releasing both of them. So he provides a little bit more stability at the position as well as one hell of a leg. And while Daryl Worley did play solidly this last season and our pass defense was a top 10 pass defense in the NFL by yardage allowed, I felt that we needed another corner to have at least on the roster and probably start on the outside and in our nickel defense, which is pretty much our base defense when we do move Casey Hayward to that slot role. And Leon Hall had pretty solid coverage ratings, nothing spectacular, but for the price of $4.2 million, I thought that was a pretty good bargain to get a solid cover corner who is versatile at both covering in man and zone, since we do run a fair bit of each. And I was using free agency as a buffer for things that I didn't think that I could get during the draft, but I did not want to have to bank on a rookie to start alongside third-year linebacker Denzel Perryman at the inside spot because I did not know what would be available at any of our picks. So we went out and signed the veteran Carlos Dansby to a deal for 1 year and about $5.5 million. Excellent zone coverage. He has an 85 zone rating and also a 71 man rating. So if we wanted a blitz, we wouldn't have to worry about him being a liability in coverage. He's our best coverage linebacker, great tackler. The only downside is he is kind of slow, and that is why his overall is dragged down so far. But I thought for the value, he brought a lot of skills to the table that I really like out of that position, especially considering the way that we run our defense. And as I said before, I was using free agency as a space to fill in spots that we didn't necessarily think we could find in the draft. And we had 3 offensive line spots. As of right now, I'm planning on playing King Dunlap at center and moving Matt Slauson over to right guard, just based on their skill sets and what I think is going to work out best for the team. And the other guard spot is going to be going to longtime Green Bay Packer Josh Sitton, who was released ironically a day after I recorded this footage by the Packers, and he is now on the Bears. But he was still on his old contract in this as we have finished the first season, and he was available in free agency. So we decided to scoop him up for a pretty good contract, less than $10 million a year. I thought he was going to be pretty expensive, but he didn't turn out to be. And he was our best overall free agent signing, but I saved one for last. I know you guys really wanted this one. I saw a couple comments saying this thing, and I went out and did it. We needed him in the spot anyway. We needed somebody to fill this role, so here it is. We signed wide receiver Vincent Jackson, returning to San Diego, the place that he started his career after I believe it would be 4 or 5 year stop in Tampa Bay. He is going to be returning to the AFC West and Phillip Rivers on a 2-year, almost $13 million contract. We needed a outside receiver so we could play Travis Benjamin in the slot. Last year, James Jones filled that role, and he was productive, but he did not want to return to the team. And I was really hoping that this man would be available, that the Buccaneers would not re-sign him. I'm very excited for this reunion, even if Phillip Rivers does not last the entire length of the contract. You never know with retirements in this game. This might be Phillip Rivers' last year. He might have another year left in him. And same for Vincent Jackson. He might not even live out the duration of that contract just because of the way retirements work in this game. So, with free agency wrapped up, let us get into the draft. After all of the moves that you saw me make just a few seconds ago, these are our picks. We have 3 second-round picks, a third, and 2 fourths, and a fifth. No 6th or 7th-round picks, as well as number 3 pick overall. And so things played out as perfectly as they could have, as San Francisco took the top prospect in the draft, Hugh K, at number 2, after the Baltimore Ravens drafted a left tackle, Sheldon Riddle, at the number 1 spot. So we are going to be in perfect position at number 3 to draft the man we wanted. We wanted this guy or the other guy, would have been satisfied with either. But we're going to get the better out of the prospects. Parker Donahue, now he was a little overrated in terms of I drafted him slightly higher than his overall would indicate his true talent to be at, but he's an excellent pass blocker, and this is the only spot we probably could have gotten him in. He would have fallen much further if we did not draft him here. Our first of 3 second-rounders was pick number 35, as San Francisco took another quarterback right before, so that's a really strange organizational strategy for them. And we had quite a few options left on the board at this point. We could have taken an edge rusher, an offensive lineman, our quarterback we could have gotten earlier, but I like this guy that we scouted out, Dalton Dansby. He was still available. He was supposed to be a first-round talent, and I think he's going to be the future of that middle linebacker position. We do have Carlos Dansby to start there this year, and Dalton Dansby does have a similar overall, but I want to develop his stats a little bit. He has great block shedding and hit power and tackling already, but I want to work on his coverage and a couple other skills. So he's going to be in the rotation as the 3rd middle linebacker this upcoming season. And so our next second round pick was pick number 49, and we were looking at the options, and this man somehow made it all the way to us. Now, we could have taken that corner, Carson Kazir. He actually had a pretty good overall too, but we are going to go with the big right tackle, Deshaun Snell. Excellent run blocker, not the greatest pass blocker, but we will be working on that right away, and he is going to be starting at our right tackle spot this upcoming season. So that was a pretty good value pick for when we did pick him. And then our last second round pick was the last pick in the second round overall, and I wanted to jump a couple of teams that were coming up in the draft. Shortly after we drafted Deshaun Snell, the Jets were up and they picked a quarterback, Evan Bridge, and there were two more teams in the second round that needed quarterbacks, the Saints and the Patriots, and I wanted to jump both of them so I could have my pick of the two that were left, because Evan Bridge was actually the guy that I had wanted, but he was taken right before us. But it was a deep class, so we had a couple of options still. So we traded with the Lions to move up a few spots. We also had to throw in a 5th round pick, and that is going to become important for reasons that you guys will see later. But with our next pick, pick number 57 in the second round, we were going for our quarterback, as Brent Ballers and George Rayback are both still here. But I went with Brent Ballers. He has much better speed, as he is listed as a mobile quarterback, and he has a superstar development. So that is going to be good. We're going to sit him as our number 3 quarterback behind Rivers and Garoppolo, but he will be taking over that position as soon as Rivers steps down. So that was a really good pick, I thought, especially because of the development traits and because he was really the only quarterback that had any sort of mobility, and that's going to come in important, as that adds a whole nother dimension to your offense when you have a guy who can just step up out of the pocket and get a few yards on his own. So we'll be developing him as a quarterback of the future behind both Garoppolo and Philip Rivers. He will not be playing this season. So here we are in the 3rd round. We have one 3rd round pick after picking 3 times in the 2nd round, and we had a variety of options to go with. We got our 2 offensive linemen, we got a middle linebacker, and we got a quarterback. So we're addressing quite a few positions. So we're actually going to trade down with the Cleveland Browns, because the guy that I wanted here in this spot was still going to be on the board by that point. We're also going to pick up a 4th round pick next year, which I thought is going to come in pretty handy. Just to move down like 7 spots, I think it was. We were at 67, so we moved on 9 spots to 76 and picked up an extra 4th rounder. And so here at number 76, we had a few different options we could go with. We had a few positions where we're going to need guys in the future that are going to be cost controlled and fill roles that we might need, that we might not be able to find next year. And this was a deep receiver class, so I decided to make a move for a receiver. This guy was supposed to be a mid-second rounder. He does have slow development, and he needs work on his catching, but he's already very fast, and he could turn into something big for us, as this was actually a good pick, and he was much better than the pick that we drafted him at in terms of talent. So I'm excited for that pick. Our next pick was originally going to be the 99th pick in the draft in the 4th round. But we are going to move down 1 spot with the Chicago Bears and pick up an extra 7th round pick next year. I thought that was a pretty no-brainer trade. There was nobody that we thought we were going to lose to that spot anyway. And we're going to trade down again from pick number 100. We are going to look at these trade offers. And there was a deal with the Denver Broncos where we would drop down 7 slots and pick up an extra 7th round pick next year. And these are really just picks that I'm acquiring to use as trade pieces, either in this draft to move up or in next year's draft to move up, that I don't plan on actually making the selections, but they are just valuable assets to have. And so now we were in the 4th round. We had gone pretty heavily on offense up to this point. We had only 1 defensive pick, and that was Dalton Dansby in the 2nd round. So we wanted to use these next couple of picks that we had to address the defense, and there were a few options here. We could have gone safety, could have gone corner, but we are ultimately going to go with Dominique Bernard. He is going to be our starter at D tackle in our base defense, but I really envision him as a long-term replacement for Corey Liuget, who is on a ridiculous contract that I will probably be getting rid of after this season if this guy's progression goes right, as Corey Liuget is a very overpaid player for what he brings to the table, and Bernard is almost better already. So he will be starting at D tackle in our base defense this year, but see him more in the future as a future pick, more than for addressing anything right now. So now we are at pick number 120 in the draft. This was the selection we acquired from the Arizona Cardinals in exchange for Dwight Lowery and Brandon Mebane. And just like I said with the last pick, we were addressing defense at this point. We could have gone for a blocking tight end, could have gone for a safety. We're ultimately going to address corner. This guy had pretty good zone coverage, but he's also going to end up having pretty good man coverage, as you'll see in a moment when he does get drafted. And I think this guy can actually be a pretty solid guy for us. He's going to be probably in our dime defense to start out the season, moving Daryl Worley to that 5th stringer, as he already has really good zone coverage ratings and man coverage ratings for a 72 overall. He needs to work on the awareness, but other than that, I think this is a really good value pick at this point in the draft, as this guy could potentially start for us next year. I said earlier that not having a 5th rounder would come up as being important later, and here's where it would. We did not have a 5th rounder, and there was one more guy that I wanted to get in this draft that I really liked. So we are going to have to overpay a little bit to get back into the 5th round, but like I said, we paid off with all those trades that we made earlier, moving down and acquiring extra picks, as 2 of these are actually extra picks, and we have to trade our own 4th rounder to get back into the 5th round as well. Might end up screwing us later, depends on how good our team ends up being this year, but we'll see. I thought it was a little bit of an overpay, but I really wanted to move back into the draft, and that was the only way to get there. And so now we have pick number 134 in the 5th round, and we were going back to offense. Now I knew that we had drafted 2 important players already up to this point, but we were in need of one more spot for developmental purposes. King Dunlap has a ridiculous contract as well, and Matt Slauson is going to be off of his bargain of a contract this year and probably going to be in line for a big payday. So we went after run blocking center Eric Lair, who actually had really good pass blocking ratings as well. And this is another one of those picks that if we didn't have a stopgap piece in place, this guy could totally start for us, but he is going to have a year on the bench to learn behind some of the more experienced offensive linemen on our team. But I think this was actually an amazing pick at this point in the draft. We got a 5th round pick who could potentially be a starting center for our offensive line for 10 years. So I thought that was an excellent pick at this point in the draft, and honestly, it was well worth trading up in the end. So overall, we had an 8-man draft class, and I'd say this is one of the best draft classes I've ever had in Madden. We drafted Parker Donahue, our starting left tackle, who already has excellent ratings. Dalton Dansby, a future starting linebacker. Deshaun Snell, our starting right tackle, a great run blocker already. Brent Vollers, a future star quarterback. Craig Brink, a developmental wide receiver who already has 92 speed. Dominique Bernard, a starting defensive lineman. Antoine Benford, a future starting corner. And Eric Lair, who is going to start on the line in the future. So it was a very future-heavy draft, but you got to think long-term with some of these picks, as they will be cost-controlled for 4 years. I wish they had the 5th-year options on the first-round picks, but they don't in this game, unfortunately. But that's one of the keys to building a contender, is having a lot of controllable talent on rookie contracts. And I think that this first offseason was a very successful one, especially in the draft, as we addressed quite a few positions that had question marks in their future. And we also went out and made a few more additional moves in free agency, signing a group of guys to 1-year deals that we needed for depth, a few of which are undrafted free agents that I think might end up being pretty big, but we never got a backup tight end or a 3rd-string running back in free agency, and we are only going to be rolling with 2 tight ends because we don't have any more cap space. So Brandon Myers will be our number 2 tight end. We'll make a move if we have to due to injury or underperformance or whatever this season. And one more thing of note, we are going to be switching head coaches. I was using Mike McCoy this entire offseason because he already had the scouting board unlocked, as well as a couple of free agent packages. But Antonio Gates, the former Charger, will be taking over as our head coach. Now I know he looks nothing like him, but they have a surprising lack of custom coach options in this game, and so the Chargers will be starting a new under a new identity, new team, new city, new coach, new everything. Not new uniforms. They're still the Chargers, and they still have Philip Rivers, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL today, and honestly in the history of the NFL as well. But Antonio Gates, their Hall of Fame tight end, will be taking over as the head coach from this point forward. Hopefully they can improve from the Mike McCoy era and all the eras before that where they were relatively not successful. One last thing we have to do, and that is set our goal for this season. We did make quite a few improvements this offseason, but you got to keep in mind, we only won 3 games last year, and we had one of the worst run defenses in the league. So I'm hoping that these changes can make our team significantly better this season, but making a 7-win improvement is not very easy. So I'm going to say that we're an 8-8 team this year, and that will be our season goal. I know this video ran long. I wanted to have it out earlier. I actually planned on having it out yesterday, and it has been a few days without Madden, but this was a long video to make, and there was a lot of stuff to cover. The first off season is always an important one for a franchise like this, and I wanted to make sure that every move we made was included in this video because our team looks drastically different than they did last year. So I am going to be playing 8 games this year instead of 7. I don't know exactly how that happened. I'll be playing 4 home games and 4 away games. Our first episode will be against the Baltimore Ravens in week 2. It'll be our home opener. I'm also going to be including recaps of any game that I did not show gameplay for in this franchise in future episodes, because it was kind of a mystery as to what was going on with the team outside of me telling you, oh, we're 2-12. You would not have known what happened to get us to that point in previous games during the season. So I will be including those in future episodes. I'm also going to be showing the depth chart before the next episode. I made a couple of things that I don't think I showed in this video. Like I cut a couple of guys that I lost the footage for, and I actually had footage of the depth chart, but I've changed it a couple times since then, and I can't find where it is on my hard drive. So it's easier just to do it's easier just put it in the next video. I would include it in this video, but I am exhausted at this point. This took a lot of work, and I am going to go do something else with my life. So the more Chargers franchise, I'm probably going to have the first episode of the second season out tomorrow. If not, it will definitely be out the day after that. That's going to do it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and let's look forward to a more successful second season of the Chargers franchise. Thanks for watching. See you next time.